Dear reader, I want to begin by sharing with you one of my favorite memories from college. It was from the middle of my freshman year, when I was in the middle of a very intense week of studying. There were a lot of tests that week, and a friend of mine asked if I wanted to be his accountability partner to make sure that we were studying as people who were relying on God. So I said yes, and that night we got together at about 9:45 p.m., and then we got settled into our study room, and then he pulled out a guitar, and from 9:55 for 5 minutes until 10 o'clock, we just praised God, singing some praise songs. And then at 10 o'clock, we got to work. And then my friend had written 10:55 on the chalkboard. And we kind of kept an eye on the clock, and when 10:54 and then 55 rolled around, we stopped. We put our books down, and then we opened up our Bibles, and as we had agreed on, we decided to read some Psalms out loud, taking turns. Him reading a Psalm, me reading a Psalm, and so on. And then when it became 11, it was time to get back to work, and we hit those books again hard until 11:55. And then for 5 minutes, we stopped. We decided to take some time to pray for our friends that we knew were also studying and also under immense pressure that day. And so on and on it went, hour after hour, with us taking the 5 minutes before each hour to prepare our hearts to lean on God throughout that process. We went on like this until about 2:55 a.m. And then we realized that during that last bit of prayer that we were barely coherent, really tired. So we knew it was time for bed, and we bid each other good night, and we separated and went our ways. That night, instead of seeing myself as one in competition with my peers, I studied as a member of Christian community. Instead of pushing myself to excel, I decided to humbly ask God to grant grace as I studied. And that night, I started to break the habits of performing work as a way of proving my worth. However, my old tendencies, I see, keep coming back because my brokenness runs deep. There is still a voice inside of me that hisses, "Show no weakness. Do whatever it takes to get the job done." And for a long time, I granted this voice authority over me. I acted as if this was the voice of God. Following this voice, I would literally slap myself awake so that I could drive further or work harder. I believed everything depended on my performance, and that if I failed, I would disappoint and cause loss to many. So following this voice made me swing from anxiety when I wasn't satisfied with my performance to great pride when I felt like I had done well. At first, I blamed my parents for these voices that I couldn't shut off inside of my head. Because I grew up with parents who spurred me to do my best by telling me that I was competing with literally everyone in this world for prosperity, security, and glory. They motivated me with a mixture of flattery and threats, and they told me that I was special and that I could do anything. They told me they were counting on me, and that made me feel like I had to do everything. Their voice haunted me. In seminary, someone taught me to pray, "God, silence within me every voice but your own." And at that time, I thought I was asking God to silence within me the voice of my parents so that I could be ruled by God's voice instead. However, for a long time, I kept blaming my parents for the voice I had, and I couldn't really hear God's voice instead. I would still get triggered, and my body would go into fight or flight mode every time a deadline approached. And this prayer only became answered as I learned another prayer, which is, "Jesus, Son of God, have mercy on me, a sinner." As I repeated this prayer, I gradually recognized that I had to stop blaming others and recognize that it was me that had made the agreements with Satan. It was my pride, my embrace of flattery, and my workaholism that was causing me to be so driven. I realized I was not an innocent victim, but a partner in the crime of rebelling against my Creator. So confessing my guilt and asking for forgiveness, it helped me to be more receptive to the Holy Spirit's prompting. Because the Holy Spirit would prompt me to pour out my sorrow and beg for help like David instead of pretending to be in control. The Spirit also helps me to enjoy the discipline of keeping the Sabbath. I am learning to enjoy wasting time with God and with the people that I love, doing things simply for the sake of being together. I am learning that it is not through me doing my best that I live a good life, but through asking to receive God's best, which is the filling of the Holy Spirit. As I do so, as I rely on God to grant the grace that I know I need, I am learning to experience the blessing of walking with God instead of performing on stage, and to see myself as a person in which God's Spirit is acting. May the peace of God be with you as well. I'm Pastor Sam.